right, welcome back to Ducks and Pucks. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones. This week we've got a good show. There's some more Ducks news going on, even though there hasn't been any hockey. We've got some Teemu news, some Silfverberg news, and some Giguere news that we're going to talk about. We also have one of our writers, Jeremy, on the show. He's going to talk with us today about all the moves and what's going on and some of the stuff he's been doing on the blog as well. And then we'll round up the show with a little bit of a discussion about hockey analytics and some fan questions. So first off, on the news, we had Teemu Selanne Hockey Academy. Eddie, what do you think? They're going to try and build an academy in 2 years.
I think Teemu said in one of his press conferences that he says that they have goalie schools all over the world in Finland, but not goal scoring schools. So it looks like he's I'm not sure. I haven't heard much about it, but it looks he's building it in Finland, right?
Yeah, that's correct, in Finland.
Yeah, so it looks like he's just trying to bring something new to the academy schools there that they don't have. And if you look at across the NHL, it's not like they have any problems bringing up Finnish hockey players there, but I think it will help in the long run in developing better goal scorers coming from Finland.
Yeah, definitely. And we have Jeremy on here with us too. Jeremy, what do you think about the academy for Selanne?
I think it's a great idea. You're looking at it being a goal scoring school. Who better in Finland to, open a goal scoring school other than Teemu? Doesn't get much better than that. So I think it's definitely great, and it'll help develop even more about that Finnish talent over there.
Yeah, he talked about, from one of the Finnish reporters, he talked about the school not only being for Finland, but he was talking about Sweden, obviously, because it's right there. But he talked about Russia, and he also talked about North America, U.S. and Canada, Eddie. He talked about all of it.
Yeah, I think well, he's obviously gonna start in Finland. I wouldn't be surprised if he opened more eventually, but it's a long process to open one of them. So I think they said it's gonna take them a couple of years to actually build the sports complex that they're looking at building. But yeah, if you have it over in Finland, I wouldn't be surprised if you got people from anywhere close by, like Sweden or Norway, to come over and participated in his hockey school. And then, yeah, eventually, I wouldn't be surprised seeing him opening up one, close to California if that's where he's going to be staying, or in Canada too.
That's a good point that you bring up, Eddie, because some of the reaction that some of the fans have told me is, it's great that there's going to be an academy in Finland, but they're like, what about over here with all the growth and the development? Maybe he or someone else tries to make one out here, either, on the West Coast in the United States or Canada.
Yeah, like is it like you said, hockey in California is definitely growing with the success of the Kings and the Ducks and the Sharks. So I think it's only a matter of time before he brings one here. Obviously, he's focusing on putting one in Finland first, but like we said earlier, that he's obviously looking to open more eventually. So I think California is definitely on his mind.
And the other news we still haven't heard is whether or not he's going to play in Jokerit. Jeremy, what do you think? Do you think he's going to go over there and do the 1 year deal? He was offered 10 million for a full season or 5 million for just the home games.
That's kind of a tough one for me to answer, because he still has both of his sons over here that are going to school over here. They're both playing hockey over here. I think he's gonna do it just for the reasons that it's Teemu and he's a hockey player and he can still play hockey. It's the money. They could offer him $1 million and I'm pretty sure he would still do it. The money has nothing to do with it as far as I'm concerned when it comes to Teemu. So I see him doing it. I'm not surprised the decision hasn't been made yet. I think it's something he's going to think about for maybe a couple more weeks, and then eventually he'll probably end up doing it, maybe just the home game, so he's still able to travel over here when he needs to. But I think at some point he's gonna say yes, he's gonna do it.
And this is another thing that Eddie and I brought up. What do you think about Saku Koivu? Because he's the only other Duck that hasn't resigned with another team. Do you think he may go over there with Teemu?
That The only reason I would actually say no to him doing that is because of that concussion that he got last year. And, it had actually really, he said at the time, it had really, really scared him because he'd never really have a problem with that before. And he didn't want to have a problem with that ever again. So I'm kind of thinking that, this could just be it for Saku because, he was staying with the Ducks for one more shot at a cup. And while he could have a chance in Minnesota or Montreal, I just don't see it. I kind of think his hockey career is just finished all around.
What do you think, Eddie?
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like he's taken a long time, obviously, to make his decision too. I don't know how many teams are actually interested in bringing Saku Koivu over to their team. I think like the only ones that we've mentioned are Minnesota to go play with his brother or go back to Montreal, and I don't really see him fitting in either of those teams. So, like Jeremy said, I think his career is pretty much over too.
All right. Well, as far as some other news going on, in addition to Teemu, we'll wait for his decision, obviously, and see if he goes to Finland, and Koivu's hopefully soon after that. But we've also got Silfverberg got re-signed, and for 1 year, 850,000. What do you think, Eddie?
I think it's a really good deal, actually. It could turn out to it depends because it's sort of a bridge deal. Bridge deal is usually 2 years, but it's only one. It's for relatively nothing. But we only got a limited sample size of what he could do last year. He played 52 games, and then he went off with injury. So I think that both of them recognized the situation last year, and this is probably the best contract for both of them right now. And Silfverberg will be looking to have a good season this year so he can get a payday next year.
What do you think, Jeremy? Do you like the 1 year deal, or do you think he should have gotten more? Some fans were telling me that they had hoped for maybe a 2 or 3 year deal.
Well, what I had read originally was that he was actually offered a 2-year deal similar to what Vatanen got. And basically, he and his agent had turned it down because they want the option of that 1-year deal to pretty much prove himself. Because, like Eddie touched on, he played 52 games last year. He ended up missing a lot because of that slash to the hand he took in Ottawa that broke it, and was out for those 2 months, close to 2 months, whatever it was. And he never really came back after that. I mean, he's always kind of sort of had an issue, even internationally, where when he's shooting, he tends to be, somewhat inaccurate, sometimes either shooting really wide, really high. And I think we definitely saw that after he came back from the injury. Now, I do know that he's over in Sweden right now, training and playing locally over there. So I like it from the standpoint that, it's a cheap deal. Not that the Ducks really need the space. I believe that they're ranked number 23 in cap space right now. So they've got a lot available, but it's for him to do that to himself. I'm going to show you that I can, play up to, a high level deal. And I hope he does that. My only concern with it is that I hope he doesn't get, a big head about it when, if he does play up to that level that everybody's hoping he is and demands a lot more money than, Bob Murray or the Ducks are willing to give him at the time.
Yeah, because like you said, expectations are kind of high. He came over and was on fire in the beginning, in those first handful of games until he got hurt. What do you think we expect from him this year, Eddie, in terms of goals and assists and performance?
Well, if he plays on the line that we were discussing before and that Bruce Boudreau mentioned in the interview on Sportsnet, if he plays with Cogliano and Kessler in that second line, then you could see his production rise significantly. He still had a decent season last year, even with injury. 23 points in 52 games isn't amazing, but it's his first year in the team last year, and he's getting assimilated and everything. So, and playing with a center like Kessler, I could definitely see his numbers rise from that.
Yeah, I mean, like we had talked about on previous podcasts, is that second punch that the Ducks need. And, if you have Silfverberg, Cogliano, and Kessler on the second line, I think that's the second punch that the Ducks need. What do you think, Jeremy?
I definitely agree with that. I mean, the Kessler signing was huge just because, it gave them so many more options. Cogliano's a natural center, but Cogliano's problem at playing center is that he's actually well under 50%. I think he's like 39% in the face-off circle, which is not what you want out of your number 2 center, especially when you've got, Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry playing on the line, in front of you, you have to have that second punch. And Kessler was huge because I mean it's gonna give them that, and it's gonna elevate whoever plays on his wing. So I mean Cogliano was a beast last year, and I really think he's gonna be even better this year. And hopefully it's that little extra that gives Silfverberg what he needs to get to where he wants to be, get to where the Ducks want him to be. I definitely agree that's going to be, if that's the way that those lines are set up, that's going to be probably, arguably the best 1-2 punch in the NHL next year.
Yeah, and that was part of the issue that we had in the playoffs last year was in the face-off circle. I mean, I can't remember what I looked up the stats on the Dallas series. I can't remember, but I know against the Kings we were about 50 less in face-off wins. So, Eddie, I hope that this will help not just in the regular season, but the postseason next year.
Yeah, well, now we have Getzlaf, who's not terrible at faceoffs, but he's definitely not one of the top guys in the league at faceoffs. And then you bring in Kessler, who is one of the top guys in the league. You bring in Thompson, who can hold his own in the faceoff circle, and then you bring in Raquel, who looked pretty decent in the faceoff circle last year. And if he's going to play third or fourth line center, you've got 3 or 4 guys who can win more than 50% of their faceoffs, which is something we haven't had in a long time, and it makes a real difference, and hopefully we'll see that next year or this year.
Yeah, definitely. Another question that I got from some fans too was we had Thomas on a while ago, and he wrote an article about Bobby Ryan and the trade, and I still get some fans, and I don't disagree, that are irritated about how that all went down. Do you think next year when we look at Silfverberg and how he's going to do, Jeremy, do you think the fans are still going to compare him to Bobby Ryan?
I think everybody's always going to compare it to Bobby Ryan because, I mean, Bobby Ryan was a, perennial 30-goal scorer year in and year out. But, I mean, when you look at that trade, I mean, I just don't see how the Ducks came up short. I mean, sure, we lost Bobby Ryan, but Bobby was, getting to the point of being irritated with the trade rumors and all of that stuff every year. And then, he was never, when you're playing on a team with Getzlaf and Perry, you're never going to be the guy, to put it kind of cliche, you're just never going to be the guy for that team. They're always going to be, the number 1, the number 2 people that, everyone's always talking about. And when you look at the trade with Ottawa, I mean, we got Silfverberg, who has a ton of potential. We got Neusen, who was, Bob Murray's original target in that draft, and he lost out on him, obviously to Ottawa, the pick right before the Ducks. He ends up getting him anyway. We got basically Nick Ritchie with their pick. I mean, it's the trade, I think, just leans too much in the Ducks' favor. But, yeah, I think it's always going to be compared because Bobby's just one of those guys where, he's probably going to end up scoring 30 goals plus for the rest of his career no matter where he lands. But I think we got too much in return to really, criticize the trade.
What do you think, Eddie? You think we did well on that trade, or do you think we should, still try to hold Silfverberg to the Bobby Ryan standard, or what do you think?
Well, I don't think we should really hold Silfverberg to the Bobby Ryan standard, considering we got 3 players in the deal. If it was Silfverberg straight up for Bobby Ryan, then I could see why people would want to compare both of them. But it wasn't a straight up swap. We got 3 guys in return when you take into account Nick Ritchie. And yeah, like we still haven't seen a full season from Silfverberg. Nason's still in the AHL, and then obviously Nick Ritchie was a top 10 pick, and he's looking pretty good too. So I can't really see how we lost this. Bobby Ryan's rumored to be leaving Ottawa for Philadelphia in a trade. So I don't see really any way how we lost the trade between for Bobby Ryan.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, that's what I've been trying to tell some of the fans that have, done the comparison. And I'm like, look, it wasn't a straight up, 1-for-1 trade. We got 3 people. I mean, you've got to look at it in the long term, just like both of you have touched on. And if you look at the big picture, I think the Ducks still came out ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, and like you guys are saying right now, it's just we got too much in return. And like Eddie just said, I mean, Bobby's finding himself in the middle of trade rumors again because, Spezza has just left Ottawa. And, they're a team that's really not looking to spend money. And I don't know how much Bobby's going to be demanding really, but, I could definitely see him moving in the next year. And then, where does that leave Ottawa with that trade? They basically lost out on 4 players pretty much then. So I agree with you guys. I just don't see how the Ducks missed on that one.
Definitely. The other news that came out this week, which we we all pretty much had heard, but was Giguere coming out saying that he's going to announce his retirement next year, next week, Eddie. What do you think about Giguere retiring?
Well, yeah, I think it's probably the best time. He had that little skate around with Selanne, and he's fallen behind Varlamov in Colorado. He doesn't get a lot of playing time. So it's the best time for him, and yeah, like he'll definitely be remembered, and his jersey will probably be the next one to be retired by the Ducks after Selanne. So, but yeah, I think it's definitely the best time in his career for him to retire.
And speaking of that, if he is retired by the Ducks, Jeremy, do you think the Ducks retire him later this year after the Teemu retirement, or do you think maybe the Ducks organization waits till next year?
I think they're going to give it probably until next year, just because, Teemu's going to be the first number to be retired by the Ducks ever, obviously, and I think they kind of want to just remember this season as the season that, his number and his number only was retired, and then, probably in the next season they can start looking at guys like, obviously, Giguere, and then, possibly even Niedermayer, who knows. But, yeah, I think it's going to be at least a full season.
All right, and if it's next season when they retire, one of the fans had asked me, will they retire Giguere's number, 35, and then does Gibson stay at 36? Because before he had worn 35, Eddie.
Well, if they retire the number, I don't, or if, they raise his number to the office, I think he'll have to stay at 36, or go with one of the with 1 or 30 or something. But I don't think it really matters in that aspect. If they retire 35, I don't think it's a real big deal to him if he doesn't get 35.
Right. Well, we look forward to that, and hopefully, like we said, it'll probably be next season. Giguere, there's just so many good memories. Obviously, we talked about this before, Eddie, the 2003 run, obviously coming up one game short, and then 2007, the best season, of course. So I think, just like Teemu, Giguere will always be a fan favorite just because of his class act and just the way he's interacted with the fans and dealt with the media and everybody else. What do you think, Jeremy?
Oh, I agree. And you saw it, the night where, fan appreciation night, Teemu's last regular season game, where they ended up doing, Jiggy wasn't expecting it at the time, obviously. His reaction when Teemu came over and kind of grabbed him to do that final skate together was a little bit unexpected on his part. But, you saw it. Everybody that was in the building that night was on their feet. And, it was a great moment. And it showed that the fans in Anaheim haven't forgotten about him. And, we all still love him for everything he did for us and the guy that he is. So, yeah, I definitely agree.
Any other final thoughts on Giguere, Eddie?
Yeah, I was trying to. You asked me about this a couple of days ago. What team they'll play against when they retire his number, because Selanne they're retiring on the 11th when they play Winnipeg. So with Jiggy, do you do Calgary? Do you do Carolina because he was drafted by the Whalers? Do you go with Colorado? Do you go with Toronto? Who do you play against when you retire his jersey? That's what I was kind of wondering.
That is a good question. That's actually that was Alex from Huntington Park that asked us that question. Is who would he play? As some people don't know, he started with the Hartford Whalers, which are no longer existent, obviously. So I think that's a tough one. I think maybe if the Ducks retire his jersey next season, and maybe you can chime in on this, Jeremy. I think maybe they might do something like opening day, or maybe something like fan appreciation at the end of the season. Maybe they'll just base it upon one of the big home games where the Ducks, honor the fans, kind of combine it like that. Or maybe, do you think something else, Jeremy?
No, I kind of think you've got it right there, because he's played for so many teams, whereas Teemu, it made sense to do it against the Jets because that's where he started his career, and I know a lot of the Winnipeg fans are going to be coming down for that game, and everybody's looking really forward to that, so that made sense. But with Jiggy, it's kind of hard to just say, okay, well, we're going to do it against this team because of this reason. It just makes more sense to where it could be an opening day type retirement ceremony, or like you said, a fan appreciation day where the building's definitely going to be full already and all that. So I could see it on either one of those days, actually.
What do you think, Eddie? You think it'd be one of those days, or would you pick a certain team for the Ducks to face to honor Giguere?
Yeah, I think doing it on opening day or one of those days is best too because he played 8 games for Hartford, so doing it in Carolina would be kind of pointless. And then he
Right.
played a couple seasons for Calgary, but he only played about 20 actual NHL games for them. The majority of his career is in Anaheim, and then he plays like a year in Toronto, and then a couple seasons at the end of his career in Colorado. So there's if you're gonna pick a team, Colorado, but it still doesn't make any sense to go and play Colorado. So you might as well do an opening day or fan appreciation night.
Yeah, I think that'll be probably one of the best two picks for him to be honored. And we talked about this too before, Jeremy. Do you see anybody else that the Ducks would retire after Giguere? We had our poll question, and obviously Giguere's been number one. I can't remember the percentage, but do you see the Ducks picking someone after Giguere to retire?
Well, I think, when you're looking at it, the obvious choice is going to be Scott Niedermayer. I mean, even though, he went into the Hall of Fame last season as a Devil, he's probably always going to be remembered more so for what he did. In the grand scheme of things, he's going to be remembered more so for what he did in New Jersey. But, I mean, to everyone that's a Ducks fan and lives in Anaheim, you're never going to forget Scott Niedermayer basically being, the catalyst for that run and that victory and everything he did. I mean, I kind of think that, he definitely deserves it. I know a lot of people have said Paul Kariya, but I don't, personally, my thoughts on Kariya, I don't really have an issue with what happened with him. I mean, it's a business at the end of the day, and,
Right.
You do things for money. I get it. And sure, maybe it wasn't handled, the greatest way ever, but I think, and Tim Ryan actually touched on that, not at this last open house for those season ticket holders, but the year before that. And he kind of said, there's a lot of mixed feelings on Paul right now for them to even really be talking about that. So, I mean, it could, but, Bobby Ryan wore his number 9 after he left. And, it's definitely not the same as with Jiggy where, you guys said Gibson's been wearing 35 since he started. And he's kind of got that 36 because 35 is the hands-off number now. So I'm thinking maybe Niedermayer. Paul, I just don't see it right now.
Yeah, I agree. Eddie and I went back and forth on this one before, and I think Eddie agrees too. We kind of lean. I mean, Niedermayer didn't play so many seasons, obviously, with the Ducks, but I think we kind of lean that way, Eddie.
Yeah, I'd love to see Paul Kariya go in, but it's just it's too many mixed feelings between the fans. There's not like a majority or like 100%. You want most of the fans to appreciate the fact that he's going in because if he stands out there and they raise his jersey, I don't even know what the reaction would be. I feel like there'd be most of the people would be happy, but there could be a couple of people out there who aren't really with it. So and you kind of I look at it the same situation with Alfredson leaving Ottawa. Obviously Korea doesn't have the same resonance that Alfredson does in Ottawa, but Alfredson leaves to get cups and go to Detroit and get a Stanley Cup, and you get a little bit extra money, and he's still loved there. He was hated for a bit too, but with Korea it's a bit different. He still has, after so many years, he still has a lot of people who don't like how he left. So I don't see it happening in the the near future. Maybe eventually if everybody gets over it, but yeah, I don't see it happening. I'd see Niedermayer before Korea for sure.
Yeah, I think even in one of my other poll questions I had thrown out there on the blog, I think Niedermayer, it was something about the team captains. I think it was Niedermayer, I think, was first and Korea was second. I mean, it was back and forth, but I think you're right. There's too many mixed feelings. Going forward, this coming season, the big issue has been, and Eddie and I talked about this, and Jeremy, you just wrote about this, has been the Ducks defense. And you wrote the last article about the Ducks defense and who you think's in there. And I'm just kind of curious to get your thoughts on it. Eddie and I have talked about this a little bit, but how do you see the Ducks pairings and maybe a trade coming down the pike?
I'm really, as far as the pairings go, I mean, as of today, I don't see them changing a whole lot from last year because, I mean, when you look at it, Lovejoy and Fowler worked out, basically perfect together. I mean, Lovejoy is just solid all the way around, I think. And I think he's really, kind of undervalued and underrated when, he's talked about by analysts and stuff like that. Fowler, obviously, I mean, he's got that expectation. And I've talked about this, with a couple of my friends as far as Fowler goes. We kind of sort of want to see him get maybe, that assistant captain role and see if maybe that is, that added responsibility is kind of sort of what elevates his game to where, he wants, where he gets to where the Ducks want him to be. And, all the fans obviously want him to be because he's got a lot riding on him. So I expect him to be better this year. I mean, he was pretty good last year. And like I said, he worked out with Lovejoy really well. Vatanen, obviously, I'm going to see him probably paired with Brian Allen again, just because, I mean, I don't think Allen was terrible, but he's just kind of, he's just kind of there really to me. He did play well at, times during the season, but I think, when you're looking at guys that might not be around anymore, you kind of sort of have to look at contract situations too. And, Clayton Stoner obviously was just signed, and he's kind of more or less a younger version of Brian Allen that might get, a little bit more physically involved with things. And when you look at their contracts, the Ducks are going to have two, UFAs at the end of this season, and that's going to be Allen and Boschman. Boschman, obviously, I'm expecting to finish out his contract. I don't necessarily think he's going to be brought back after this season. Allen just seems to be, if there is any sort of a trade, it seems like it's going to be him just because, I mean, basically he's going to be gone at the end of the season anyway, so the Ducks might try and get whatever they can for him since they've got that option with Stoner there now. And, Fistrick is now on that 3-year deal, so that makes him tradable too because it's relatively cheap. But I think, he's younger, and when he was given his chances last year, he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what the word's been as far as with Allen, like you said, looking at the contract at the end of the season. Fistrick is another one that some people have brought up because usually he's been this, the seventh guy that's kind of rotated in on the last pairing. What do you think, Eddie? Any other additional thoughts?
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot already on a couple of the podcasts, but I think it's not really worth it to a couple of fans are saying that we should go out and grab that top 4 guy, but I don't really think it's worth it to sell some of the farm to go grab a top 4 defenseman when Lindholm's entering his second season. We've got Vatanen coming in. He's probably growing a bit too. We've got Fowler who's looking to come off a productive season last year. I think we should give these guys the chance to fill out the top 4 instead of going out and selling some of the good prospects we have to go out and grab a guy that we might already have.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think, we talked about this before. I can't remember. One of the writers wrote about Fowler and Lovejoy as well. And you bring up a good point, Jeremy. I didn't think about Fowler being an assistant captain. That was another article we had. And that's a good point to put him in that spot because some people have mentioned Kessler, but you know what? Kessler wasn't on the Ducks team last year, so I don't see him getting that A.
Right.
So, I mean, it might go Fowler. Some other people, I think Eddie and I talked about this. Some other people have mentioned Corey Perry, but I don't know if it's going to be Corey Perry. I see more maybe like an Andrew Cogliano type, maybe. What do you think, Eddie?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I wouldn't mind seeing Fowler either. There's been argument about Corey Perry too. It's when you look at leaders in that room, there was Selanne was, the leader there, even though he didn't have the A on, and Getzlaf's the big leader, and to me it doesn't really matter. I could see Cogliano too. I could see Fowler, I could see Perry, Boschman even. They'll work it out, and to me it won't matter either way, if it's Cogliano or Perry. But I would like to see Fowler get it. He might take that positively and have a better season because of it.
Yeah, definitely. And, a big thing that's kind of been going on when we look at the Ducks defense and how they've been doing around the league, we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but a lot of people look at the plus minus stats. And, you obviously look at the Ducks defense and almost everybody was in the plus 10, 20, 30. They were all doing very, very well. But there's this new movement now that's going on that they're talking about analytics and they're talking about these possession stats and all these other factors that they're looking at. And what do you think, Eddie? Do you think, that we shouldn't look at plus and minus and goals and assists and all that? Or do you think, we should?
Well, I've never liked the plus minus stat really. It's kind of shady, the plus minus stat, in how people use it to base on a player's ability. In some cases, it works. When you look at Yakupov and Ovechkin, who had terrible plus minus. The last year, obviously, you look at their play and you can tell that they rarely forge back check. They don't have any defensive capabilities usually, or any responsibilities for defense. But when you look at the Ducks with all their guys plus minus, well, yeah, we were we were top in the West last year. I'm pretty sure most of the guys are gonna be in plus, and significantly in the plus. So it doesn't mean that necessarily that they themselves perform to a high level. It's just the team was performing to a high level and scoring a lot of goals. But as for analytics, I'm not well versed in analytics, to say the least. But I think it's good that we're starting to bring in like Kyle Dubas into the Leafs organization. There's a couple other people that recently, I think someone got hired for Edmonton. I can't remember the name right now, but yeah, it seems like they're starting to move out. The old boys club in the in management in the NHL, where it's all former players and upper management guys, and they're moving in newer, younger guys that trying to bring in the kind of the money puck revolution that they've done in baseball. So I don't know exactly how it's gonna work in hockey, but I'm definitely trying to learn more about it and intrigued to see how it turns out.
Yeah, you bring up baseball, and that's that Moneyball movie with Brad Pitt. They talked about the Oakland A's, and instead of going with home runs and RBIs, they're looking more on base percentage. And I'm not well versed in analytics either, and we're going to try and get a guest on the show to further go into this for all the fans. But it seems like from what I've read and I looked at, they kind of compare it to puck possession, in the offensive zone as being a key to winning, as opposed to plus minus shots on goal and even the Corsi stats. What do you think, Jeremy?
I'm with you guys. I'm not well versed in it at all yet. It's kind of new, especially for hockey. I mean, I don't see how it's really going to hurt anything. I mean, I can kind of see the argument from both sides of the fence on that one, where it's going to be additional stats and it's going to look more like you said, at puck possession and things like that, which we really don't look at a whole lot right now versus the plus minus. And then I can see a lot more kind of hockey traditionalists saying, well, these are the stats that we've had forever. What's wrong with them? I agree with what Eddie said. I'm not a huge fan of plus minus, just because I don't think it tells the whole story. I mean, I think we can all agree that the Ducks defense was kind of a weak spot last year, and then you look at their plus minus, and everybody was almost a plus because we were scoring goals left and right. Second in the league, one goal behind Chicago as far as goals scored last year. So it doesn't it doesn't tell the whole story to me. And I kind of think if you're going to introduce something new, you might as well, because I mean, it's not going to hurt anything really. I mean, I think it's probably for the better.
Yeah, definitely. Eddie, what do you think about the Corsi stats? They try to factor in more not just shots on goal, but shots aimed towards the goal and other things like that. Because shots on goal too, to me, is a stat that some fans complain about if a team gets 40 shots and one goal, or 20 shots and three goals. But I don't really like shots on goal by itself either as a stat.
Yeah, with shots on goal, the stats, when they record the stats, it's kind of gray when you say if a shot's actually on goal or not. I'm like I said again, with Corsi, that's puck possession stats. I've heard the word. I've looked it up a couple times. I know very little when it comes to Corsi stats and how it affects people's perception of teams. I've heard that the Ducks have terrible Corsi and puck possession percentages. That's a couple people on Twitter were saying that's why Danny Healy was such a bad pickup. He's one of the worst, has one of the lowest Corsi percentages in the league, and we're already a team that's desperate for puck possession. But in that aspect, I don't see why it's such a big deal considering how well we did last year. But yeah, like I said again, I'm not the person that's best to discuss this, but I don't see any problem with how it's going right now.
Yeah, I mean, looking at what they're talking about, the kind of the way I look at it is face-offs to me is one of the biggest stats. I mean, there's not one single stat that you can sit there and go, hey, if you do well at this, you're going to win it all. But if you have to pick a stat that to me is significantly important is face-offs, because if you win the face-offs, wherever you are on the ice, that's going to lead to more puck possession. That's going to lead to more opportunities to score. That's the one stat that I lean on, and the reason why, and I hate to do it, but I go back to the King series, and that's why, to me, one of the big reasons we lost that series, Jeremy.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and it's, you kind of touched on it earlier, talking about Kessler and Thompson and Raquel. I mean, Raquel's a guy. He was, if I'm 100% correct on this, he was our actual face-off percentage, leader in the playoffs.
No, you're correct.
Yeah, so he was doing his part. Getzlaf, he's improved in it, but I mean, it's like he said, it's an art, and he has not mastered it yet. I mean, I've heard those words come from his mouth. He thinks he was talking about it at the open house and said, people think, oh, it's real simple. You just line up in a circle, you put your stick on the ice, and you get the puck. It's as simple as that. But it's he said it's basically it's an art form that he hasn't mastered, and he's hoping to improve on it, just like he did last season. But it was like you said, it was a killer in that King series. We were just not winning them, and when you've got a face-off coming up in your offensive zone, possibly even on a power play, you have to be able to at least be above 50%. And Kessler, Raquel, Thompson, all of those guys are, above 50% in their careers. So I think that's something that, the Ducks, it really hurt them last year, like you said. And I think it's going to be actually one of their strong points this season. And I mean, when you're the Ducks from last season and you don't have a whole lot that needs to get worked on, and you immediately fix a face-off problem, which was, probably one of their bigger issues, then, I mean, the teams, it's just looking really, really good for them right now.
Yeah, the other thing, Eddie, that's good about the face-offs is I think the power play unit, the first unit, you're going to have Kessler in there taking the face-offs with Getzlaf, Perry, probably Heatley, and then whatever defenseman you want to put, probably Fowler or Lovejoy or Beauchemin. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I think we can look at the power play, which also had some issues in the playoffs because it would be hot one game and then not another. Maybe some more consistency there, Eddie.
Yeah, when you look at the power play and you look at big time centers that we have that you'd want to put on the power play, it's hard to see Getzlaf and Kessler playing on the same unit because then the second unit is significantly weaker, and the second unit is always going to be weaker. But then you got to put either Thompson or Raquel on that line, or Cogliano to take faceoffs, and I don't think that's the best option, even though Getzlaf isn't that great at faceoffs. I'd rather have the 1-2 punch on the power play as well instead of having, Kessler and Getzlaf on the same line. Because if you do that, then you've got Perry on the wing, Getzlaf on the point with Fowler, and then Kessler, then whoever they put on left wing. And then, automatically when you drop down to that second unit, you've got to put a guy who's not always on the power play and Thompson, and then a newer guy in Raquel. And if they give that much responsibility to Raquel, it could be a good thing, but I'd rather see them at least start with Getzlaf and Kessler on different units.
What do you think, Jeremy? You think that they should put them on separate lines or try to, load up on the first line?
Well, if it was me, I'd probably actually start them out both on the first unit. I mean, last year, it's like you said, our power play was either outstanding or it was terrible. And more often than not, it was, terrible. We just couldn't get it done. And it was, outside of faceoffs, that was our other big problem last year, was the inability to score on the power play. I mean, a guy that people don't really talk about a lot when it comes to the power play is also Sami Vatanen, who's got, he doesn't have that Sheldon Story type shot where it's, really, really hard and really, really powerful, but it's really accurate. It is, pretty strong for a guy his size. And I could definitely also see him playing back on the point. But as far as that first unit goes, I think you got to try it with Kessler getting the face off, and then given, that chance to Perry and Getzlaf to actually punch it in.
So what do you think? You and I think similar. Eddie disagrees a little bit. What do you think as far as the second line center? Who would we put? Would we put Thompson or would we put Raquel in there? I mean, I remember you wrote an article on the centers, and you had good perspective on that. What do you think as far as the second power play unit?
That's that's another tough one, because I mean, the other thing you have to look at with the power play is who's going to actually be running it coaching wise this year, because we just hired Trent Yanni, the Admirals coach in Norfolk, and it looks like he's going to be taking over the special teams. And Norfolk had, a really, really good special teams units on their power play and their penalty kill last year. So, I mean, the great thing about that hire is he has a lot of experience with guys like Raquel, Fontinen, all of them, all of our younger guys. So I kind of think, if you're going to put a center on the second power play unit, it might be Thompson, just because he's kind of sort of the veteran right now, and Raquel's a little inexperienced. But that's going to be one of those things where I think it's just going to come down to training camp and preseason, and maybe even well into the season, just to see who's more successful in the circle. Because I think it's got to be whoever you pick. It's got to be the guy that's just better at winning the faceoff. So I see it as Thompson probably to start, and then hopefully Raquel after that.
We had a fan question too about the centers. We had one from Dylan in Edmonton, and he was talking about Palmieri playing on the third line, but playing on the third line as a center. Is that a kind of option, Eddie, that you think we might try to do, with Thompson and Raquel? I know we talked about them being on the third and fourth line, but maybe you throw Palmieri in the mix, or no?
I think we talked about this with Thomas too, and we looked up Palmieri's face-off stats, and they're almost non-existent. Because he's playing the odd penalty kill center role or something like that. I don't think that's our best option. If we're gonna put anybody at center, we're gonna force a winger to center, then at least put one that's played there before in Cogliano. But yeah, I definitely don't think Palmieri is an option unless he's shown somewhere else that he can play center. But from what I've seen, and it's limited, I don't think he'd be the best option at all for third line center.
Right, I think he'll be on the third line as a winger, with probably Thompson as the third line center, and maybe Raquel as the fourth line center. What do you think, Jeremy?
Yeah, the same thing, and I mean, you're looking at as far as the third and the fourth lines go. I think, it could be Thompson on the third line. It could be Raquel on the fourth line, just like you said. And I mean, who plays their wings is kind of sort of up in the air right now. I mean, it's kind of funny when you think about it. If you put Raquel on the fourth line, and then you put maybe Emerson Needham, Devontae Smith-Pelly right next to him. Well, that's a line they had in Norfolk that was really, really successful for them all season last year when they were all there together. So that's, definitely an option. As far as maybe a fourth line goes, it doesn't really seem like a fourth line because there's a lot of scoring capability on that line, but it's a good possibility. As far as Palmieri as a center, I don't see it. I don't know why you'd ever really have to. Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at on that. I kind of think we're going to see, Getzlaf is 1, Kessler is 2, Thompson is 3, and then Raquel is 4 for a while anyway. And I mean, it's a Bruce Boudreau team, so it could start that way and 6 minutes later be something completely different and stay that way for a game. So who knows? But that's kind of the way I think it's going to start anyway.
Yeah, you make a good point too in there about the lines, because Eddie and I talked about this. Even though we've had the interview with Boudreau on here from Sportsnet, and we had the first 2 lines figured out, I think, Eddie, you can agree with this too. The third and fourth line, we're just going to probably have to wait till the beginning of the season to see how that's going to shape up.
Yeah, and like with the Bruce Boudreau team, it's really not going to be a third and a fourth line. It's just going to be, they're basically the same line. They're going to play the same amount of minutes. He's going to rotate at all the lines. And with the skill on both lines, you're not going to see typical fourth line minutes from that fourth line. You're going to see about 12 instead of about 6 minutes per night. So, and it's going to be the same with the third line. I see him rotating them equally and getting all the guys out there instead of having typical fourth line minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, it's like the Ducks will have line 1, line 2, but then line 3 is really either one of those interchanged, even minutes, like you said, most of the time. Any other thoughts on that, Jeremy?
No, just pretty much what Eddie said. It's a Bruce Boudreau team, and he's always preached that whole, you have to win, or you have to roll four lines to be able to win. And luckily for the Ducks, they've got that talent up, all the way up and down their roster to be able to actually pull that off. So I think, Eddie touched on it and pretty much nailed it. It's not really you're not going to look at the Ducks third and fourth line and be like, okay, that's a third and fourth line. Obviously, I mean, it's going to be, that those third and fourth lines are going to be meant to take a little bit of pressure off, obviously the Getzlaf Perry line, and then, the Kessler, Silfverberg, Cogliano lines, all that. I tend to agree with Eddie on that one. It's not going to look like your typical third and fourth line.
Yeah, I agree. And that's pretty much it this week as far as our news and the things that we're going to discuss about the Ducks. There wasn't too much news around the league. The only thing that did come up that was kind of interesting, I think Eddie and I talked about this, is that the Luke Robitaille statue is going to go up at Staples Center. Any thoughts on that, Eddie?
I don't know. It's kind of he's an icon there. But I don't know. Do they have any other statues up, or is this their first?
For them, just Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
all.
then I was gonna say, yeah, Wayne Gretzky is definitely the first option. I don't know. I don't see why Luke, but he's a fan favorite there, so I guess they can do whatever they want. But yeah, it's kind of confusing. But there's a couple other guys that come to mind that they could put up instead of Luke Robitaille. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting decision by the Kings.
Yeah, because he won a Stanley Cup, but he won it with the Detroit Red Wings. But he has been with the management since they won. So, any thoughts on that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, it kind of makes sense for them because, I mean, his number's already been retired by them. He's still involved with the team. And, I mean, when you look at it, I'm obviously not a Los Angeles Kings fan, but when you look at it, he, short of winning a Stanley Cup, he's done a lot for that organization. So, I mean, I can see it. It makes sense to me. And I mean, I think he's one of those guys who's definitely earned it. Like you said, he won his Stanley Cup with Detroit, obviously not LA, but you kind of got to look at it as, in the overall grand scheme of things, how much he actually did for the team as a player and, also now in management.
Exactly. Basically we'll just wrap up here with a few updates on the blog. I had some issues with a company called Getty Images, which I wanted to tell everybody about. If you're a blogger out there, you're someone that's using photos, not to use Getty Images because they will come after you for copyright issues, which I'm glad Jeremy is helping us out greatly. If you'll notice on the blog lately, most of the articles have had his wife's photos, Christine Perry, on there. So thank you for taking those photos, Jeremy, and letting us use them.
Oh, you're welcome. No problem.
So that's just something that you guys out there that are also in the same, area doing blogging or whatnot, or you see other people, just make sure to be careful of that. And another thing that we're going to do on the podcast is we're going to give away tickets to opening night. I was able to get an extra pair of tickets. What we're going to do is basically Eddie and I are going to throw out a phrase, or actually a word that's part of the phrase, I'm sorry. And after 4 podcasts, there'll be a phrase that the words will form. All you got to do then, and we'll obviously announce it when all the words have been put out there, is just send us an email. We'll keep it open for a few days, obviously, because I know that not everybody listens to the podcast the same day. But what we'll do is have all those words each week. This week the word is going to be ducks, so that's the first word in the somewhere in the order of the phrase. Is ducks, and then we'll keep rolling with that, and then what we'll do is we'll announce the winner probably 5 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, Eddie, once we get all the phrase out there, and then we get the answers, which will be a random winner will be selected. And that's about all we have time for this week. Thanks for joining us, Jeremy. We look forward to having you in weeks to come.
Great. Thank you for having me.
The Anaheim Ducks are the Stanley Cup champions.